All right, so I'm going to kind of get into the thesis now, and I would love feedback if you want to talk about it or if you have questions about it, because that can sort of help direct, what I'm talking about as well. But the mind, when it is unconscious, is feeding what I call the nemesis. I call it the nemesis because, Gene, if you don't know where your mind is, where is your mind? You don't know. We have no idea. So we could literally be feeding these unconscious habits. So I look at a habit as like a river. Some ways to look at habit is you have the mountain that's creating the water, and then it turns into the river and it washes out into the ocean. It's kind of the life cycle of water as it's flowing as a river. Does that make sense? Well, in this example I'm using, that's kind of how energy should, in air quotes, flow. And by should I mean smoothness, least amount of resistance and tension to have it happen. So the mind that is not engaging the world around it is doing something else. And it's a nemesis because you don't even know. You have no fucking idea because we're not here. We're just in it. We're just lost in this. And so instead of a river that has this river life cycle, it's like a river that's just a circle. It's not going out to the ocean. It's not coming from the mountains. In this analogy, by the way, the mountains and the ocean is like infinity. It's the fabric of the cosmos. It's connection. And that river are kind of, that's like the ideas that are occurring to us, all of the things that are happening in our life. Instead of being that deliberate type of river, it's turned into just this kind of circular river. And the groove gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And now we have like this circular Grand Canyon of habit. And 9 times out of 10, we don't even know what kind of habit groove we're creating because we're not paying attention. Maybe we figure it out with psychotherapy. Maybe our friend finally pulls us to the side, shakes the shit out of us, and says, "You're being an asshole all the time. It's a habit." That and sometimes the voice of power can speak through other people. Scrolling felt like a habit. Exactly. I have no issues with scrolling a social media. I don't care what people do. But when I notice myself, I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? I don't need to do this. I'm entertained. I'm good. Don't need to do. So it felt like a habit, like you said. I didn't like the feeling. That's behavioral change occurring on its own. I didn't set out to stop scrolling Facebook. No, I paid attention to it. I felt the habit. I don't like the feeling of being in habit and feeding the nemesis. And so I put more awareness and attention, and then I'm like, whoop, rule of three, do something else. Mind somewhere else, attention somewhere else. 180 degree, I'm going to go this way now with my mind. Using points of attention, voice of power, things like that. Anything I've ever recommended to you is exactly what I've done when I want to redirect the scrolling habit. That's going to get into behavioral change with this, though. And I know this is a lot what Donna has talked about. In this practice, eventually, behavioral change becomes because we feel the moment so keenly. Does that make sense? When you're in the unconscious groove, you're not feeling the world around you as much. You're feeling something, but it's not really that connecting, flowing river from mountain to ocean. It's just that circular thing. So the number one thing, this is number one, we're going to get right to the root of the shit. Where does all of this shit that we're seeing come from? Is because the nemesis is being fed and the person has the habit of thinking about themselves all of the time. And if somebody new was in here, the mind initially wants to, no, wait a second. Let's look at your thoughts. Let's look at each one of them, each sentence. Where are they going? What are they about? What are they surrounded around? Well, I'm important, of course you are. But you're not just thought. What about all these other things about you that are important, such as your energy body, your connection to the infinite, spirit, all of these other things, the ability to move and collaborate. We're bending energy with our minds, essentially. We've taken one material and shaped it into skyscrapers. That is a type of alchemy, if you want to look at it. It's just, it doesn't seem like magic anymore because we understand it better. But I can guarantee you, if you pulled somebody from, the 1800s, 1500s, and show them a skyscraper, they're going to think you're a magician. Well, you had to be a magician to pull them from that century, but they think you're a magician because the building looks impossible. Does this make sense so far, how I linked all of this together? So that idea that I need to surround myself with only the finest people like me. Oh my God. First of all, I've judged myself, I've judged other people. That's two huge violations of principle. But it begins with me. I need to surround myself with people who are like me. But I'm important, yes. But you're not just thought. You're not just this construct of self that you keep calling me. You're an energy body. You're a part of an energetic matrix that the entire universe is taking part in. Why don't we put any attention on that part of me? Because we're too busy unconsciously focusing on the concept of self. The conceptual construct that we have created that we call self. Now that would be things like identity. We've made that up. Like we create that from a feeling sometimes, but all the words around it, all the concepts around it is fundamentally constructed. We fundamentally build those things out of thin air. If we rewound human existence and started over, we would probably end up with a very different result. It would be different. It could still have the same kernels of dysfunction, I don't know, but it would still be different. It would still play itself out differently. I'm assuming, I don't know, I guess that's just a conjecture. I can't prove that. But does this make sense so far, where I'm going with this? So, the devil's advocate wants to say, but Ernest, I'm important. Self-care, self-love. I agree. Wholeheartedly, I agree. But we really have to expand the concept of self when we talk about this. Self-love doesn't just mean, that you have that bubble bath feeling all day long. The exhale, it's an exhale for a reason, You feel that exaltation for a reason because it's kind of a counterbalancing thing, which means that you had to be a little bit tense to feel a little bit of and that's a dynamic we can work with. We don't have to declare war on it. Maybe eventually we find a little bit of balance where it feels like a healthy combination between and adapting to change with the least amount of tension. Does this make sense? Does anyone have anything to add? Just checking. So it does make sense. Okay. So this is the closed river. The light of attention in the common mind, the average mind. That's a mathematical thing. It's not a judgmental thing. What is most common in the human mind is the light of attention turned in on its own thought about itself almost all of the time. That is an unhealthy infatuation with the concept of self. And that unhealthy infatuation turns into unhealthy attachment. Unhealthy attachment leads to suffering, trying to control, and willing to go to violent means to defend it. And this has been going on generationally. This has been going on for thousands of years in the human story. They've been doing this for a very long time. Killing each other, that's not new. We've been at the top of the food chain. We could have just said, you know what, let's just work together. I don't know, why not? Let's just accept each other as being very diverse individuals. That's not what happens. because there's way too much. In order for what I just said to occur, we have to kind of break up the attachment to self and say, let's all just be accepting of the diverse minds. My mind is always changing. So why would I hold you to a still frame of how the mind should be? That doesn't make any sense. Everything is always changing, always moving. So let's just be accepting of one another how we are. Let people show up authentically and just say, you're you, and that's fine, you know? There doesn't have to be a better self or a worse. If we're doing something very particular and we're doing it in this practice, we don't have to focus on that type of thing. We don't have to try to change ourselves. We're changing anyway. But if we do this practice, we'll change deliberately and intentionally because our mind and our attention and our awareness is deliberate and intentional. It's a derivative. It's just a happy result. It's a dynamic that we can work with and we don't have to use force, and it's important. And I'll be damned if I start going around judging other people because I don't want them around me because now there may be situations where you need to get out of there. These, I'm not trying to say that this is all just one thing or we all need to act one way. I'm just saying if your safety is in danger, then by all means, my mom probably was abused by my dad for way longer than she should have been. 2 days, 1 day is longer than it should have been at all. It should never happen. But to let it happen isn't also that passivity. You need to move, adapt. But that doesn't necessarily mean judging, labeling, comparing, contrasting, creating like-minded friend groups that if you're not in my inner circle or, good vibes only. What? I haven't always had good vibes. What if people rejected me just because I wasn't in the good vibe? How can I get into a good vibe if I'm not around people in a good vibe? I mean, I can, but it would still be super encouraging if people who were in good vibes only or in feeling good were accepting of people who weren't. How else can we get together and share? And at the same time, though, if I'm in a room with 10 grumpy people, I don't have to become the 11th grumpy person. I'm not taking on their energy or their emotion if I am present, mindful, and deliberately intending the point of my attention in doing my practice. If my practice needs a rule of 3, then maybe I do need to excuse myself, re-evaluate what's occurring with my attention, and then go from there. Right. What do you mean, Donna? You don't have to fix it.
You said if I'm in a room with grumpy people, I don't have to become another grumpy person, but you don't have to, you also don't have to make them not grumpy.
No, yeah, you're right. And I don't have to judge their grumpiness either. I don't have to say that their grumpiness is wrong or bad or that they should change it. I probably won't even apologize. You know how some people say, I'm sorry that you're feeling this. Actually, I don't know. If we got into a one-on-one conversation and it seemed appropriate, I might say, I'm sorry you're feeling this way. But I wouldn't just initially say that. It's not my place.
Can I add something though, Ernest?
Of course,
there is
yeah.
some middle ground there. This is a little bit black and white, this explanation, and I understand it, and it's worthwhile for explanation purposes, but there's a lot of middle ground there, because if we are in a constant state of flow and we're always in alignment and we find our points easily and we walk through life that way and we really embody it, then yes, the principles that you're saying about that, it doesn't really affect me. And also, I'm not judging them while I'm in the midst of it. I'm not, because I'm in flow, I can do that. Because I have the space to see that, I can do that. But when I'm in the process of doing it for myself, and I recognize from a feeling standpoint that, geez, maybe I didn't remember a lot today, or I'm noticing that I'm not practicing several times today, then it's not in my best interest as far as my own balance to stay in the room with the grumpy people, or to say yes to the invitation with the people where where the conversation goes, and I'm going to do something else to I'm going to do something that will make the resistance less for me on a day that might be a battleground or something. So it's not that I'm judging them or I have to be around different people, but if I'm constantly swimming in the soup of negativity, then my own practice becomes more challenging. It needs to be more impeccable in order for me to even notice that I'm in that soup. It's easy to be influenced when you're not in flow and in alignment consistently. So one of the things you might decide is to get out of that situation. And it doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to be a beating or a danger. It's just my balance is off. I can recognize it. I know what things I need to do to get back into practice, and maybe not saying yes to that invitation is a good idea for me today, because it's a battleground, and it will make my balance more challenging. It's not about judgment. It's just about knowing where you are and what your capacity is and what's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one way that we've addressed exactly what you're saying in the beginning of the practice is what's called rapid redirection. I included rapid redirection because that might be excusing yourself from a room that is feeling overwhelming. But the key, and you did mention this, and I do appreciate it, but it's not occurring in most minds, is the non-judgmental part as they excuse themselves. The reason for excusing themselves, and then after excusing themselves, it's so important not to go into the judgmental thinking. But if a person is in a room with 10 people and all 10 people are complaining, it's super negative, and you're finding that your practice is becoming more difficult and you need to rule of three outside of the room, then rule of three outside of the room is what helps to quell any judgment thought as you're coming and going. And Donna did mention this, that this does need to occur outside of judgment. So there can be all kinds of situations that you're in. You know, you're a cartel drug runner, and then all of a sudden you're practicing mindfulness, and you realize that what you're doing is hurting other people. It's not win-win-win. And you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. You might have to excuse yourself from those people and go do something else. But why did this occur? Because energetically it wasn't feeling in alignment because of their practice, and they didn't necessarily have to excuse themselves in severity of judgment. What is occurring though, and like you said, it's kind of the point of what we've been talking about so far, and it is very cut and dry, because the nemesis is being fed, it's cut and dry. But if it is on that side of unconsciousness, that person is in the room judging everybody. There are opinions of all 10 people, even if it's, what are they thinking about? How are they viewing me? That's still an opinion. You're still thinking an opinionated thought about another person. That's what's most commonly occurring in these situations. And then it's probably going to feel anxious. It's not going to feel good. And then you end up in those rooms where it just seems like everybody's pretending. Like it feels like everybody is putting on a show for everyone else. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but it's a weird energy. Does this make sense? But yeah, no, Donna really made a great point, especially now. The only thing, of course, and I put that in the comments, is a person doesn't have to be in flow for this to occur. You just have to be in practice. So, if we use somebody who is forgetting and remembering, which is a huge part of this practice, it's a huge portion, is the forgetting and remembering, until eventually we start remembering a little bit more than forgetting, and then eventually a lot more than forgetting. And then before you know it, you just don't forget your body and space and time. You don't forget certain points of attention as often. You still could, there could be something that happens right in front of you that just takes you away from your practice. We never know. That's why we have to always be diligent with the practice until we're 110. That's the idea, forever. So, Donna definitely pointed out that if we're in practice and we're paying attention to our mind, we don't necessarily have to be in flow for that. If we're in flow, there's no question. We're going to do what's in alignment, and we're just going to do it. There doesn't need to be any cognition, like verbal cognition. No thought needs to occur when we're in flow. That's actually the definition of flow. you're in movement and alignment with the world around you, and you're not being obstructed or weighed down by your own thoughts or your own, forms of cognition that don't benefit you. No explanation needed when in flow, absolutely. So, but to do what we're talking about, you just need to be in practice. You just need to be paying attention to yourself to some degree. And you might even see yourself starting to talk shit about other people. Well, these people just aren't woke. They're not spiritual people. Wait a second. That doesn't serve me to think these thoughts about other people, even if they are true. Air quotes, true. Where is my mind? Where are my weeds in my garden, or do I even know? My favorite mantra that I would say to myself, my mind's a full-time job. I don't have time to be thinking about what these other people are thinking. The moment I do, I'm feeding the nemesis. So a person just needs to be in practice, and they can work this practice out to themselves when they're in these situations. So at the dispensary, I was surrounded by people that were half my age. I can't believe I'm saying that, but yeah, they were 21, 22 years old. So just about half my age. I could have thought myself into all kinds of weird, feelings and situations and scenarios, but I didn't. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to focus on myself. I'm just going to be earnest. And guess what? 10 out of 10 people are going to think something different about me. There's nothing I can do about that. Does this make sense? So the connection, though, is everyone is half my age. So the connection is that when we are focused on the concept of self unconsciously, this other thing starts to emerge, and it's called othering. And eventually, you miss this whole process of focusing on yourself when you're focusing on other people. You're missing that link when you're in an unconscious, state, feeding unconsciousness with unconscious. And by unconsciousness, I don't usually use the word this way, but you're just not paying attention. The mind is not deliberate. It doesn't mean that you're sleeping or that you got knocked out. You're just your mind is not being placed where you wanted it to be in advance. So eventually, the focusing on self leads to everything else that we're seeing. The judgment of other people, trying to control other people, trying to change other people, trying to heal other people, trying to tell other people what to do, telling other people how they should or shouldn't live, judging why do they live this way, why do they talk this way, why would they do this, why would they do that. And we look at all of these different beliefs and ideas and cultures, and we label them, we judge them, we compare them, we contrast them, and eventually maybe even get angry with them. And then before you know it, we have race. Shana and I were talking about this. We were watching a documentary, and this is something that I had covered in school as well. Race is a new invention. I really like how the documentary pointed it out, but the concept of race, of dividing people by race is new. If you go back far enough, people were divided by everything else. You were this religion, or you were this countryman, or you were Scottish, or you were English, or you were Christian, or you were Muslim, or so that's how they divided you. They didn't divide you by skin color yet. That was kind of a thing that occurred a little bit later. That wasn't always a part of human history. The divisive part absolutely was. So we were always dividing each other into some sort of category, but we didn't start doing it by skin tone until much, much later. Does that make sense? We can fact check this later. I encourage you to. But the idea here is that all of these concepts, we're constructing them because we're so focused on trying to put everybody in all of these different categories. And then we start identifying with the categories. And I think that there can be a balance in identification. When I look into the mirror, this is what I see, but I'm also not just this. I'm so much more. And there's a part of the human experience that is not divisive, that you can't divide it. Spirit is spirit. Attention is attention. We share it. There's no such thing as superior attention. Mhm. There's no such thing as superiority, actually, but we like to create concepts. Does this make sense? Does it, any of this sound radical? Maybe a little? And so if we want to really, balance, course correct this unhealthy attachment of thinking about other people, we first have to look at how much we're thinking about ourselves. We can break that pattern. I don't spend my time thinking about people. I just don't. I mean, maybe sometimes in space something will occur. Oh, how's Gene doing today? Oh, I don't know. Guess I'll send him a message and say what's up. Yes, Gene, go ahead.
I think, in general, most people don't think about other people. They think about other people in relation to them. So I've noticed that when there are many people and I'm doing something or another, and I'm concerned about what they think about me, it happens. I say to myself, well, let's reverse that and see where I stand. Now, after I leave these people, I'll probably not think about them at all. I'll think about whatever else or whatever other situation I'm in. So I don't feel like most people retain the impression they have when they see you. When they turn away and look at something else, their attention is somewhere else. I don't think most people care what you just did or what you just said or whether they're, I don't think most people care about that. They're so concerned about themselves. Your emotions, your activities fade to insignificance. They're somewhere else now. So I don't often worry about what people think about me, because I imagine that when I turn away and they look somewhere else, they're thinking about something else. I mean, it's all gone now. It's ephemeral. It shows up, they think it, and then they don't think it again. They're not going to carry it with them, I don't think. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know. I don't know if they're going to carry that individual thought with them, but the pattern, you got that. The pattern is the focus and attention on self in relation to other people, and then the focus on other people is just a reflection of yourself. Any opinion is a reflection of your own mind. And anytime a person is thinking about another person, if it's an opinion, it is automatically a reflection of self. And so you're absolutely right. It is always in reference to self. That's why we can focus on self to help correct this constant need to think about other. And the constant need to think about other doesn't necessarily mean holding it, just means always doing it. So in your example, the person's looking at you, now they're thinking about you. And then when you part ways, the person may not be thinking about you, but they are thinking about whoever's in front of them. And then that person leaves, and now, so that's the habit. And that habit is being fed by the nemesis. Does that make sense? And then it starts to create other unhealthy habits of always judging people, always judging situations. And then before you know it, I'm right, you're wrong. You see what I mean? It creates that dynamic of I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah, I was looking at it the other way and saying, if I am concerned about what other people think about me, pause for a second and think about, put yourself in their shoes. They're not thinking about you. When they're looking at you, they're thinking about you, but their attention changes.
Yeah.
In a moment, in a flash, and
absolutely.
You're not in their story anymore.
No, not unless you did something really major. If you pull your pants down, you might be in their story for a little while. But yeah, in general, and what Gene is saying, now I didn't do it this way, but you could consider this as a part of your rule of three. So let's say that somebody is walking into a situation and they're like, oh, what's Donna thinking about? People don't really think it in that sentence. What's Donna thinking about me? They just do it. They're just thinking like, oh, Donna's thinking this about, oh, where's my collar? Like, present myself this way and that way. And so the person is putting themselves in that situation habitually, and they're very likely constantly doing something like that. But you could redirect that with what Jean is mentioning. So you could say to yourself, well, no, I don't know. Jean, Donna's, well, if I'm going to take Jean's example specifically, I would say, well, when Donna turns her direction, she's going to be thinking something else anyway, so it doesn't matter. Or when Karen, starts talking to Ida, and they're going to forget all about me, so it doesn't matter. I don't need to think too much about this. Does that sound about right, Jean? Yeah, so that could be an excellent mantra, a way of looking at the situation to help relax the tendency to focus on other that creates that social anxiety. I did something real similar. Mine was just, I don't know what they're thinking anyway. I don't know what Donna's thinking. So how can I worry about that? How can I, it makes no sense. So both of them are ways of looking at things that are very likely a reflection of principle. Yeah, a person is going to just change their attention unless you did something memorable. We do have to say that. Like if you just said the most ridiculous shit ever, they may think about that for the rest of the day. It may occur to them again and again, and because people do also have the tendency to fixate on things that are kind of a shock in their experience or they're not used to. But in general, as long as you're not, saying the most profound, ridiculous shit ever, a person's going to go from one point of attention unconsciously to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. 5 minutes later, they're not thinking about you. So yeah, I could see that principally. And then this is the other thing Donna pointed out. When you are so focused on self, you take everything personally. Everything is about you. Did they just say that to me? Oh my God. I just don't remember. That's why my acting is so bad, because I don't remember really that.
Your acting is really bad. Like they didn't even notice my haircut. They didn't even notice, or I saw them looking at my shoes. I know I hated these shoes. I saw them looking at my shoes or whatever people think in their heads. But yeah, I'm a little bit of a, I'm not a great actress, but I'm better than you. Yeah, people can get offended by you noticing something, by you not noticing something, by you because they're so oriented to self. And the distinction is that you're talking about the ego self that judges and evaluates everything, as opposed to the awareness self that is aware of my body and space, that is aware of my balance, that feels pulled towards something or feels the resistance in something and then moves to redirect that, reestablish that balance. That's a different awareness of self than the ego mind self.
Exactly. That's a huge distinction. So I am all about self-love, 100%. How do I define the word love though, personally? Connection. If my mind isn't getting in the way, I can connect. And if I connect to something, I start to feel something about it. My grandpa felt something about war. He was in the trenches and he wrote love in war. And he imagined that the other soldiers were doing the exact same thing he was, considering their family, considering their loved ones, wanting the best for their country and the people that they care about. That the two people fighting have identical goals, but they're being driven by forces that they feel are beyond them. Does that make sense? So what did my grandpa do? He simply found connection with the enemy. The enemy, I put that in air quotes. And what happens when he felt that? He felt love for his enemy. He felt love for somebody that tomorrow when he wakes up, he will have to shoot at. Because if he doesn't, he's going to die. They're going to shoot at him. So he feels like he's in an untenable situation, but he was still able to find a connection. And that can happen at any moment. All moments can be a type of connection to where you're just feeling this exchange between infinite and finite. That's a loving feeling. When you look at children, you're not looking at the judgment of them. You're not looking at the constructed self of them. When you're feeling that heartwarming feeling, it's because you're connecting to their infinite side. The infinite side of you is connecting to the infinite side of them. And when that flows, it just feels wonderful. It feels like we're getting really close to optimal human experience here. And that can happen romantically. It can happen with dogs, animals, birds, inanimate objects. When you watch Castaway, I'm willing to say that Tom Hanks's character loved Wilson, which was a volleyball. He connected to Wilson, but it was a volleyball. So who are you to describe the nature of love? So I just talk about the dynamic of it, not necessarily the manifestation of it, how it manifests itself. So yeah, no, I think Donna's right on point with when I say self-love, or when I say that we do need to care about it, you do need to focus on yourself. Every single person here needs to focus on their self as far as I'm concerned, to a certain extent. I'm saying that very loosely because I don't like telling people what to do. But I want to focus on myself 100% all of the time. Wait a second, doesn't that sound like a contradiction? No, because as Donna pointed out, I'm not just talking about the story of Ernest. I'm not just talking about my memories, my likes, my dislikes, my future dreams and hopes and aspirations and experiences. That's what gets offended. I mean, that's included. I wouldn't say that we're just going to deny that aspect, right, Donna? That part of us exists and we work with, we adapt
Right,
to
it's
it.
all
We
about
move with it.
balance. It's all about balance. It's
Right.
about not the ego self, not dominating
Mhm.
your existence. There's
Yeah,
another side of existence that exists when we practice awareness.
exactly. To deny the self is just a different form of indulgence. So I'm okay. Give me a name. Call me Ernest. I'll share my memories, and I have a personality. Sometimes it's appealing, and I'm sure sometimes it's not so much. I don't know, but I'm okay with that because that's changing, that's moving, it's evolving, it's learning, it's growing. I'm fine with that, but I'm not going to deny it. No self. What are you going to do all day? I don't know. Just going to create. What are you going to create? I don't know. Well, you don't know because you're in this nothingness where there's no, what are you going to be motivated by? I don't know. Source. Okay. I mean, that's not inaccurate, but it's also just not a very good answer. So what about all these other aspects of ourselves? That is what I'm recommending to focus on. Not to deny the ego or the construct or the identification self, that construct. I don't have to deny it because what do I do when I'm denying it? I'm focusing on it. I'm still looking at it. I'm still blowing it up in my experience. So I'm just doing the same shit, just in a different order, thinking it's going to give me a different result. It's all the same numbers. So, but what Donna is saying and what I'm recommending is that we have this thing, attention. When attention is deliberate, you're aware of your own attention. You're aware of it. You're consciously aware of it. You're recognizing it. You are perceiving your own attention when you're in the state of deliberate mind. That's the infinite. That's the fabric of the cosmos. I don't usually use the word, but the God particle, the God factor is in that undifferentiated, never being destroyed, always existing. It's the same for you, for me, for birds, for insects, for aliens and Alpha Centauri. Attention is attention. And it's shared, it's infinite. The more I talk about it, the more stupid I'm going to sound. That's just the way it goes. But I can still perceive it. I can still make a connection to my own attention. And then all of a sudden I feel the energy body. I feel the non-physical, unseen aspect of the human experience. The reflection of source I call spirit. The reflection, we can see that reflection. We can move with that reflection. And if we move with Tao, which is the way the universe is moving, highly geometrical. But if we move with the way that everything else is moving, then we're imitating source. Does that make sense? Because source is the inspiration for the way that everything is moving, in a manner of speaking. I use the word Tai Chi. I've made this. Why do things move? That's a fundamental force that I call Tai Chi. It has always existed. It will always exist. It has always been. And now our binary brains want to say, no, there was a beginning. I get it. It's very difficult to wrap our minds around infinity because you can't wrap around it. It's infinite. You can't wrap your mind around infinity. There's infinite layers to the onion. All right, so does all this make sense? The recommendation is officially to charge the other aspects of self with conscious attention, awareness, purposefulness, deliberate mind. Paying attention to the energy body can begin with imagination. That's a great way to activate the energy body, is by imagining energy. And then you're like, but I feel tingling, like I feel these sensations, this flow. Yeah, you do. And that feeling is the ticket. That feeling is the spirit that we're looking and to experience. It's a feeling. It's all a feeling. So, but the imagination can help spur that feeling along. Does that make sense? And then before you know it, sometimes the imagination to you is new, but is also shared. Now that's an interesting concept. So you can imagine something that you've never imagined before. So it's new to you, but it's also shared because other people have come to that same conclusion, that same imagination. That's how you know that you're getting really close to the manifestation of something. Einstein's theories, many people were coming to the same conclusion about the same time. Archaeologists believe that the bow and arrow, roughly 1,000 years, plus or minus-ish, was created about the same time in opposite spaces, separated by space and time. We were coming to similar conclusions. I'm sure there's people around the world right now that are talking about the nature of deliberate attention and how deliberate attention is the fundamental game changer. That if we start to focus on spirit, everything can change. We can catch flow with it. If everybody or the majority of people catch flow with spirit, before you know it, we're using our imagination for win-win-win. We're using our curiosity for win-win-win. Elon Musk, super curious dude. But is it always a win-win-win scenario? I don't know. I don't give it a lot of thought. Maybe, maybe not. But just in general, I love that triple W scenario where it's win for me, win for the people directly involved, and win for everybody else indirectly involved. Sometimes I would forget the win for me part. Does all this make sense? And the practice that we're doing is how we work with these materials. We didn't just get a bunch of information that's intangible and we can't do anything with it. The information that we know points back to our practice. I'm in a room with 10 people. I'm starting to feel social anxiety. I can say the mantra that Jean said. Because it's accurate. I can observe this. I don't. They're probably not going to be thinking about me once they start talking to each other. And if everybody's talking to everybody else, they're also probably not thinking about me. And then the earnest mantra, and even if they are, I don't know what they're thinking. How could I possibly know? So let's just focus on where your attention is, where your breath is, where your body is. Put your most authentic self out there and go from there. One of the things I've learned with my recent job search, I ended up with 2 different resumes. On one resume, it was really earnest. Earnesty, I guess you could say. It had a lot of, I used the word ego in my resume. That's not a common thing. I talked about energy. I talked about the focus of attention. It's not common for somebody to talk about these things in an application, resume, and cover letter. So I showed this to people, business people, and they're like, Ernest, you got to change this. It's too long-winded. Nobody gives a shit about your esoteric practices. Nobody cares about how you view ego and the universe at large. You need to tell people how many words per minute you can type. You need to tell people how much experience you have managing other people and what specific skills you have. Well, that was something went off in my mind when they said the word skill, because my mindfulness practice is a skill, homie. Like, this is something that I'm getting better and better at the more I practice. So I am accumulating a skill, and I'm talking about a skill, and a skill that will cover every single base of business. Every single aspect of the life cycle of an employee can be improved and bettered upon with mindfulness. How you're going to benefit the business. That's a good one. Yeah. So I ended up with 2 different resumes. And then I started getting calls back. And I saw a pattern. The people that were calling me back with the first resume saw me. They had a better view of who Ernest actually was, and they were interested in that. The other folks, they saw Ernest's experience. They saw how many words per minute I could type. And they saw that. And that's not bad. That's not good. I'm not saying one's better than the other necessarily. But who do I want to work for? I want to work for the person that saw the energy Ernest, because that's the part that I'm representing the most. And I end up at a place that views things very similarly as I do. So working at Shenshen, they do have the philosophy that we're not healers. Like, we're not healing. The body heals itself. We just need to get out of the way. Acupuncture can help you get out of it. Can be a tool. And they'll say this is not a crutch. This is not something that's supposed to solve your problems for you or make pain go away. It might for a little while, and that's your opportunity to pay attention, to make some. And I've seen them doing this. I've seen the clinicians doing this. So the massage therapist, she'll take you out and she'll be like, so these are my recommendations to help improve your tennis elbow so that this doesn't continue to occur. Afterwards, try doing these stretches. So they're offering preventative maintenance because they don't want you necessarily coming back all the time. They're not looking for lifetime patients. If you do have pain, come to them. They'll do their best to help remedy that type of thing. I'm wildly in alignment with that philosophy. I love it. I love being immersed in like-mindedness, but it was on accident, sort of. But I was okay being immersed in not like-mindedness at the dispensary. We're similar in some ways, but trust me, very unsimilar in other ways. I don't talk about it much because then it starts to feel weird. But at this job, I feel like I'm more inspired. I'm getting more new ideas. It feels like all of these jobs have just been pointing a direction for me. And I can learn from it and pay attention to it. And I can follow this and continue to learn from it and pay attention to it. I do want to work for a business, and now I feel this now, that is genuinely about wellness. Not using it as a guise to, make billions and billions of dollars. Definitely not using it as a guise to, well, yeah, not so authentic forms. But the only reason I'm saying this is because I'm just learning. I'm learning that if you put your authentic self out there, you have a better chance of making quality connections with other people. Does that make sense? I'm not saying to reject folks or try to select who can be around you. No, you'll just make natural connections with people. And the folks who just can't stand you, they won't come around you as much. They don't like the earnest that doesn't talk about ego and doesn't compare and contrast and argue and label and judge. I'm not going to do that with you. So we're probably not going to talk about much. And so I just end up kind of not hanging around those people all that much. But I'm not judging them. I'm not thinking about them in relation to me. As Gene points out, that's how it happens. The erroneous focus on self leads to the erroneous focus on other, to the point that the person becomes attached to the concept of self, and they become attached to the concept of other, and then it becomes a closed loop of opinions, trying to control, labeling, judging, thinking you're right and other people are wrong, offering unsolicited advice that people didn't ask for, thinking that you know what's best for people so that they can make positive changes. This is all toxic. All of it can become wildly toxic. Depending, I mean, it could also be the inspiration of, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna go do something else. And then in that case, it was a part of learning. Does that make sense? Same thing occurring, but if you're unconsciously indulging in it, it can become wildly toxic. Same thing occurring, but if I'm consciously aware, I can adapt and move and learn and grow, no matter what it is. All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns? I'm great at Q&A. But Mike just joined not too long ago, but this is othering. This is where othering comes from. How often are you thinking about other people? Not Mike, I'm sorry. But Mike and I came up with the word othering. That's kind of what we ended up calling it. The focus on other people is othering. How often do you think the average mind is doing that? When driving, when interacting, when by themselves, watching TV, the news or whatever, social media, constantly focusing on other. To some extent, you might have to. Maybe you're a manager. But again, I still don't think that you have to focus on the concept of the other person to be a good, effective manager. Management can be a part of synergy and flow, adaptation. All of these principles can make you a great manager. It can make you great at anything. Conscious awareness and attention is the sure track to accumulation of skill. All right, any questions? Mike, anything on your mind before we head out? Ida, Karen, hi Carly. Shayna, anything before we head out? This was a pretty, yes, Ida, go ahead.
I didn't mean to do that, sorry.
Well, dang it. Now you have to say
Okay.
something.
No, I want to just say that I really enjoyed that and it was really nice. That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, so this kind of really did get to the root of, this is what Buddha, air quote, Buddha was talking about, is the attachment to self. And that attachment to self has caused all of the suffering we see around us. And that attachment to self creates the attachment to other. We get closed in that loop, and yeah, we end up in a world like this.